The question that every organization who wants to implement continuous improvement culture needs to ask itself is this: is my organization smarter than an ant colony? In every colony, there is a certain amount of ants that, when they encounter a pheromone trail, they ignore it and they're going their own way. We will call them ant anarchists, ant disruptors. And there's a few different things that can happen if you are an anarchist ant. And what they did is they just put one PDF invoice without a barcode and they uploaded it into a system and it got processed. And then they took 3 and put them in the system and they also got processed correctly. And so what we have found is, after many years of printing PDF invoices to slap a barcode on them, we have actually found that it is not really required. Until next time, remember, if someone tells you that's just the way we've always done it, that's your cue to grab a katana and politely ask why. Konnichiwa. Welcome, Process Warriors, to the AI Automation Dojo, the only show that looks at the endless quest for workplace perfection and asks, are we there yet? And if so, can we take a nap? Today we're diving into the sacred arts of continuous improvement. We're talking Lean, Six Sigma, Kaizen, all those methodologies that promise a world of seamless efficiency. You know, the stuff that looks great on a whiteboard but often meets its mortal enemy in the real world, Brenda from accounting, who has her own process. I'm your host, Andrzej Kinastowski, one of the founders of Office Samurai, where we look at a 100-page slide deck and ask the tough questions like, couldn't this have been a haiku? So, whether you're a certified Lean Sensei who sees waste in your sleep, a manager trying to implement a Gemba walk that doesn't just end at the vending machine, or you're just here because you heard the word Kaizen and thought it was a new type of sushi, you're in the right place. Now grab your favorite katana or that value stream mug you've been working on since 2018, and let's get to it. Today I want to tell you a story of how I was hired into a shared service of a big international airline group. And I was hired there to fundamentally change what it is. My role was continuous improvement head. And the first thing I noticed when I joined was that there is a huge culture clash between me and the rest of the organization. I didn't know it at the time, but later I have found that I was the first manager to be hired from the outside in the last something like 10 years. So all of the managers and department heads, they have been grown within the company, which by itself is not a bad thing, but it creates a certain culture of people who have all grown together, who share the same values and the same ideas, but it can sometimes be a bad thing because any ideas coming from the outside, they are quite hard for them to accept or to follow. And so what I have found is that I got into so many discussions where I would be basically screaming at them, saying, come on, let's just do it. It's so simple. I've seen it implemented 1,000,000 times. And they would be saying, you are crazy. This will never work here. And sometimes those discussions would just turn into those times of us not really wanting to talk to each other, which was way, way worse. My job was to implement continuous improvement culture into the shared service organization. And when I look back at how things happened and how things develop, I know that there is one question that every organization wanting to implement the continuous improvement culture needs to ask itself. The question that every organization who wants to implement continuous improvement culture needs to ask itself is this: is my organization smarter than an ant colony? Now, there's a lot of interesting things about ants, but one of them is how they look for food. So at the beginning, a certain amount of ants will go from the colony basically in random directions looking for a food source. And sooner or later, one of them will find something that is hopefully plentiful and nutritious, something like a dead rabbit. And when it does, it will take a piece of the rabbit and it will bring it back to the colony. But while it's doing that, it's leaving a pheromone trail. So a trail of pheromones that leads from the dead rabbit to the colony. And the thing about this trail is that when other ants encounter it, they follow it. And every ant that follows it will get to the rabbit. It will take a piece of it and it will go back the same route, leaving their own pheromone trail, thus strengthening the original one. And so the next time you're in the forest and you see a lot of ants going, one after another somewhere, you can be sure that at the end of that road, there is something like a dead rabbit. Now, let's stop here for a moment and think, do we do the same things in our organizations? Because I think we do. We have ways of making sure that each one of our ants, once we have found a good way to do something, they will keep on following the same path. So we have procedures, we have standards, we have audits, we have process maps. All of those things are there to make sure that once we find a good route to do something, we all follow the same path. So at this point, our organizations are as smart as an average ant colony. And this strategy is a good strategy, but it is not an optimal strategy. And ants have found a way to make it better. In every colony, there is a certain amount of ants that when they encounter a pheromone trail, they ignore it and they're going their own way. We will call them ant anarchists, ant disruptors. And there's a few different things that can happen if you are an anarchist ant. So one thing that can happen is that you will go your own way and you will find a better way to a dead rabbit. So maybe you will find a way that is shorter, that is safer, that is just more efficient. And quite an interesting thing is that when an anarchist ant who doesn't follow the pheromone trails itself, when it finds the rabbit, it will take a piece of it and it will go back to the colony and it will leave its own pheromone trail. And some other ants will start following it. And because this route is shorter and safer, it will in time get strengthened more than the original one, and it will become the default way to the rabbit. Another thing that can happen if you are an anarchist ant is that you will venture somewhere going your own way that maybe you shouldn't have, and you will die a horrible and painful death. But what can also happen is that you will go to a place that none of the ants have gone before, and you will find a source of food that will be even more plentiful and rich, something like a dead cow. And you will take a piece of the cow and you will take it to the colony, leaving a pheromone trail, and you will forever be known as the ant that have found a dead cow. So the question is, do we also do this in our organizations? When thinking about continuous improvement, this is what I think about. Anarchy, controlled anarchy, but anarchy. Because changing things, it does require you to be a bit of an anarchist. So I want to talk to you about three main things that we have implemented in the company I was hired into. And those are three valid ways of implementing continuous improvement culture into the company, but they do different things and they address different needs and they also address different people. One of them addresses all of the employees at the same time. Another teams, specific teams, one by one. And then another one, very, very specific people. Let's start with something that a lot of people have heard about. It's Kaizen. Kaizen is an idea that when you change things, you can change them piece by piece. You can change them in small steps. When we did our program, what we did, and this is actually where the name of our company office samurai comes from. Me and my team, we have hired some samurais. And so on a given day in our offices in Krakow, Bangkok, and Mexico City, those samurais came to those offices. And let me tell you, it's surprisingly hard to find samurais in Mexico. Don't know why. Anyway, the samurais came into our three offices of the shared service organization. And before the day, we asked the managers, listen, give us the names of the people who are anarchists by heart. And what I mean by that is that in every organization, there are people that even if you do not encourage them, they will try to find new and better ways of performing our processes. You know those people, you may be one of them, aren't anarchists in their hearts. And so they gave us the names, and when the samurais came, they were going from floor to floor, shouting things in Japanese, I don't know what, and I probably don't want to know, and they were shouting those people's names. And when they would find one of them, they would go to them, present a certificate, bow, say, and just go. We did this before lunch so that people have something to talk about over lunch. And after lunch, we sent a communication saying, so what happened was we're going into the Kaizen thinking, and we explained the whole thing to the people. We have started a registry of Kaizens. So for us, a Kaizen would not be an idea for an improvement, but an improvement that somebody has already implemented. This is quite important. Different companies do it in different ways. And traditionally in production, you would register ideas for improvements because in manufacturing, a line employee most of the time cannot just change how things are being done because it requires a lot of other people, engineers, production support, and so on. In business processes, we have way more control over how we do things, and also we have way smaller continuous improvement teams which are unable to process all of the ideas that people come up with. So we have decided to gather improvements that have actually been implemented by the people. And every month, in every center, we would choose one Kaizen that was somehow the best. It may be because it was giving us the biggest benefit, but maybe it was the most interesting, the most innovative. And what was quite important is that when that Kaizen of the month is chosen, the highest ranking person in a center would go to this person's desk unannounced, and they would give them a certificate and a little gift, and they would be briefed what the Kaizen was, and they would just go and tell them, hey, I really like what you did there. I think it's a great idea. Congratulations. This was really, really important. And of course, some of the people were a little bit scared of this and a little bit traumatized. The same way that when the samurais came to the offices, some of the people were scared and traumatized too. I actually got one of the managers telling me that one of the employees got really scared and started crying in the bathroom, which I thought my first reaction was complete surprise. But this is where I really realized how big the culture clash was between me and the organization. Anyway, every month, one person would get a Kaizen of the month. And then every year we would, from all of the Kaizens of the month in a given center, we would choose one Kaizen of the year. And that Kaizen of the year actually had a bonus attached to it. This was an airline group, so the best thing we could do was to fund a ticket for 2 people, basically to any place in the world, with a return ticket, of course. So this was quite a prize, and it created a lot of buzz. But what is really important is that we started getting a lot of those Kaizens. So we started getting a lot of people registering their improvements into our system. And so over the first 3 years of the program, we got registered 3,500 Kaizens implemented in an organization that was at the time something like 1,500 people. So this is more than 2 Kaizens per person. And of course, we had people that would register a lot of Kaizens, and we had other people that registered none. But in those 3 years, more than 50% of the people have registered at least one. So I think that's quite a good achievement. Now, those 3,500 Kaizens were equal to about 12,000 hours saved every month. On one hand, it is a lot, because 12,000 hours, that's quite a big number. On the other hand, this means that an average Kaizen was about 4 hours. And actually, if you look at the median, it was even lower. So a median for a Kaizen was probably something like 1.5 hours. So those small Kaizens, they wouldn't really affect the process that much. But it is really important when you implement a Kaizen program, it is really, really important to make sure that people know that even the smallest change makes sense. And you will not get the big improvements without encouraging people to do improvements, whatever size they are. And we did get some really big Kaizens. The biggest one was 1 FTE. There was a guy in the accounting team that got into the spirit of improving so much that he improved the three-way match so heavily that he has reduced 1 FTE, and that 1 FTE was him. This, of course, doesn't mean that he was fired. That would not make sense at all. He was approached and proposed to do this for a living, and he gladly agreed. So we have moved him from operations into the process excellence area. And I want to give you 3 examples, 3 cases of what Kaizen improvements have been implemented by the people in the company. The first one, as trivial as it may seem, has been a really interesting case for me. Because the thing was, we have been at the time using quite an ancient ticketing system. It was old, it was heavily customized, and, well, let's say it was not the best thing you could work with at the time, but that's what we had to work with. And one of the things that it was missing were templates for replies. And if you worked in a ticketing system, you know that if you are able to easily use templates, then it speeds up your work significantly. And some of the people were kind of doing the workarounds, having those templates saved in some text files or Word documents. But it was not convenient, it was not fast, and a lot of people, therefore, wouldn't use templates at all. They would just type every answer manually. And so one lady was so frustrated with it that she started digging deep into the system as much as a user was allowed to. And actually, she has found that, yes, we do have templates in this thing. You just have to go really deep into the settings to find them and to enable them. And what often happens if somebody makes a finding like this is that they turn it on for themselves. They are happy because they can work more efficiently, but this is where it very often stops. Thankfully, she did a different thing. She enabled it for herself, she tested it, and then she went to her team leader and said, hey, I know how to do templates. How about I teach the whole team how to do it? And of course, the leader happily agreed. But then they didn't stop there, because when she registered this as a Kaizen, as an improvement, she was asked to present it on Lunch and Learn. We had this thing, we called it Lunch and Learn. It was before the pandemic, everybody was in the office. So we would, every month we would set up this meeting for something like an hour around lunchtime, and people could bring their lunch to a big training room, and then we would have some people talking about something interesting. Very often those were some interesting Kaizens that we thought could be rolled out to other teams, that we thought the organization should learn about. And so she presented it on the Lunch and Learn, and this way more people have learned about it within the organization. And then also a documentation was done on how to do it and then sent to all of the employees. And this way, what started as one person doing things better for herself changed into basically the whole organization getting access to those templates that we didn't know were possible to do at all. So this is a core of the Kaizen philosophy. The word Kaizen, the Japanese word Kaizen, means change for better. But usually how we think about it is a change for better, no matter how small it is. And of course, you could fit in a Chinese proverb like anywhere. There is a Chinese proverb that says, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Or you could put it in a more modern way. Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have where you are. And this, at its core, means that a small change can have a dramatic effect in the end, or a lot of small changes combined can have a dramatic effect. The second case, this is the guy I was talking about that reduced 1 FTE in invoice processing. And this case shows us another principle that a lot of you probably know. So basically, he started working on a three-way match. If you didn't work in accounting, basically the idea is that when you order something, you create a purchase order. When it gets delivered, a goods receipt is created, and then the vendor sends you an invoice. And if information from all those three documents matches, so it is identical or within certain bounds, then the invoice can be booked and released for payment automatically. And this lowers the burden on the invoice processing teams. The problem is there's very often differences. And so the automation ratio In different teams, it was different, but the average was probably like 50%. So that's okay, but it's not a lot, right? Meaning still 50% of the invoices that were coming in didn't match, so somebody had to look into them and do something to manually to process them. And so this guy was frustrated with the amount of work that was coming into the team, and they really had a lot of work. He started looking into why those invoices get stuck. Why are they not processed automatically? But he was smart about his efforts. So he created a report where he looked for the vendors with the most blocked invoices. So he wasn't looking into the small fry, he was looking into what was really driving the workload. And when he got the report, he took the vendor that was generating the most work, and then he worked with the vendor to solve the problem. And then he took another, the biggest, and then another, and then another. So he didn't try to boil the ocean. He didn't try to fix everything at once. He was trying to do it with what we would call a Pareto principle. The Pareto principle, if you don't know it, says that 20% of the causes account for 80% of the effect. In other words, if you solve 20% of the problems, you will solve 80% of the effect those problems have on your process, if you choose the problems wisely. And so this is exactly what he did, and you could say that this is just a matter of thinking in a way that I want to put minimum effort and achieve maximum effect. So Pareto principle, very, very important when you're doing continuous improvement. And then there's a third principle that I really, really like, and a lot of people are not that happy about it. The thing was, we were getting a lot of documents already as PDFs, but the thing was, the system to book them was designed before we were getting so many PDFs. And so the way things were done is on every first page of every invoice, you had to have a sticker with a barcode. And this sticker with a barcode was needed later for processing and for matching the scan with the booking. And people in the scanning team, and you do have to remember that in scanning teams, you get people with the lowest qualifications. They got curious because what was happening is when we were getting PDF invoices, what we had to do because of those barcodes, what we had to do was to print this PDF, put a sticker on the first page, and then put the whole thing into an automated scanner. So you do realize how stupid this is, right? But at the time, there was no other way to do it. And when they started asking about it, hey, can't we just put a PDF in the system? Everybody would tell them, no, because if it doesn't have a barcode, it's not going to go through. Now, what they did was just to make an act of rebellion, just to make an act of anarchy and say, yeah, really? I want to try it for myself. And what they did is they just put one PDF invoice without a barcode and they uploaded it into a system and it got processed. And then they took 3 and put them in the system and they also got processed correctly. And so what we have found is after many years of printing PDF invoices to slap a barcode on them, we have actually found that it is not really required. And this is what I would call a full principle. They didn't know it was impossible, so they did it. And this also means that with continuous improvement, very often your experience and your knowledge may as well be your biggest enemy. You have to be careful of the things you think you know. You have to be willing to question not only things that other people do, this is easy. You have to be able to question things that you think you know, but maybe are not true. Maybe not true anymore. Maybe they used to be true. Maybe nowadays they no longer are. So the anarchy principles for the Kaizen thinking is, first, the Kaizen way is do what you can with what you have, where you are. 2, think in a Pareto way when you're trying to solve problems. Minimum effort, maximum effect, and then the full principle. They didn't know it was impossible, so they did it. Always question what you know or what you think you know. So the Kaizen thing, you have to remember when you're thinking about creating continuous improvement culture, Kaizen is your way of saying to your whole organization, it's okay to be an anarchist a little bit all of the time. So every one of you has the mandate to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it and try to change it for better. No matter how small those changes will be, it's okay if you do it, and we're actually expecting you to do it. Just doing the work, just following the protocols is no longer enough. Now we want all of you to be those anarchists a little bit. Another big thing in our continuous improvement program that we did were lean action workout projects. Now, workout projects is something that comes from GE. There is a book called GE Workout. Not an easy read, but a lot of really useful information in there. But the original GE Workout was designed for manufacturing. So we took a lot of ideas from it, but we basically rebuilt it from scratch to match the business process environment, which is way, way different. And it requires way different approaches. Some of the things from manufacturing just don't work in the office. And so what we started with, of course, was communication. We gathered people in all of the centers and we told them why we're doing what we're going to do, what's going to be happening, what it's going to mean for them. We made space for them to ask questions and to voice their opinions. We gave them a plan of what we're going to be doing. And of course, the plan, we have planned going team by team through the whole organization in 2 years. And the organization at the time was something like 700-800 people, but we knew that within 12 months, it's going to double in size. So the scope for the whole project was about 1,500 people. And so going team by team through 1,500 people, that is a lot of effort, right? And each of those projects, each of those teams would take about 3 months to go through. So of course, we would do quite a few teams in parallel. And the idea for a 3-month project is basically this. We start with trainings. So for line employees, we would have introduction to continuous improvement, a training with a simulation that would basically show people the basic concepts of lean management. So things like Kaizen and Pokiyoki, workload management, this kind of things. But because it was a simulation, it was done in a fun and interactive way. And for the leaders and managers, we had lean leadership trainings, 2-day trainings where we would go way deeper into the concept that they would need to be able to manage their teams in a lean way. After this was done, we would start measuring. Now, today I would have done it differently. We would have used probably a task mining tool or productivity mining tool that would do most of this work for us. At that time, we didn't have those. So we had a tool where people would measure themselves. So they would have this application where they would choose what they are doing right now. Everybody had their own processes, the processes that they are performing, and from a drop-down list, they would just choose it, the process that they're doing right now, press start. When they stop, they would just press stop. If they go for a break or if they change to a different process, they would have to do it manually. It's not easy to implement this. It requires quite a lot of attention. It requires a lot of communication. It requires you to look at the data constantly, because the people, even if they are okay with doing the measurement, they tend to forget. They forget to turn it off. They forget to change the process. So it requires constant feedback loop to make sure that the people are measuring properly. But when you have the amount of time people spend in different processes, and then from your systems you take out the volumes and you put this data together, you get really good information on what's going on in your processes. You get average processing times, you get people's and teams' productivity, and this is the kind of information that you can already start making a diagnosis of what's going on in the team with. And we would work with their leaders and their managers on analyzing the data, on teaching them to analyze this data, because the tool wasn't there just to make a snapshot, it was there to stay as a management tool. And we were looking into the data, analyzing it, checking it, and finding out truths about the processes that are being performed in the team. And this phase would take a month and a few days, because the first few days worth of measurements is usually something you have to throw out because people still are getting used to the tool. But you need a whole month, especially in the processes like finance or HR, where you have monthly changes in the workload or processes they are performing. So you want to have at least one full month worth of measurements. And then we go into the workshop phase. And this phase would take 3 to 4 weeks. And during that phase, we would work with the whole team in a workshopy way. So we would have a training room, we would have time to work with them, and also they had to find the time to meet with us for like 2-hour workshops throughout those few weeks. And during those workshops, we would do the basic but the most important things from the lean management perspective. So first we would start with mapping their processes. We would do simplified value stream maps of their main processes to find out what's going on in the, to find the steps that are adding value and the ones that are not. Already during those mapping sessions, we would find quite a lot of improvement ideas, but we were always trying not to discuss those ideas during the mapping. We would park them by writing them down and then saying, I wrote it down, we're gonna find the time to come back to it after we finish the mapping. The mapping was to make sure we get a snapshot of how the processes are really done. Because, of course, in most organizations, you do get process maps, but very, very often they differ heavily from what is really performed by the people. So this was step 1. Step 2 was problem solving. So all of the things that came up during the process mapping, we would write down into problem solving sheets. And then we would work with the people. We would have those brainstorming sessions where they would try to come up with as many problems that they have in the team and write them down. You have to make sure that it's not just the technical problems, like the system is slow. That's absolutely worth writing down. But then also there's process problems. So the processes are suboptimal. They may have a lot of different variations. But then also we were encouraging them to write down things like problems with workload distributions, problems with training and knowledge sharing, problems interacting with different teams or with customers, even problems with the way they are managed or how they work with the leaders and managers. You need to make sure that you take this from all of the possible angles, because very often the inefficiencies are not in the process or in technology. Very often it's about the way the teams are being managed. And so we would, for every team, we would get anywhere between 40 and 100 different problems written down. And then together with the team, we would come up with possible solutions, next steps. So you break a solution into smaller steps. And of course, for every problem, we would have a deadline to solve it and a person responsible for solving it. And the person responsible for solving it should be somebody from a team and not the leader, because a lot of leaders take too much responsibility. They would take responsibility for solving all of the problems to themselves. And this means that with team leaders being very, very overloaded in most cases, that would mean that none of those problems would actually be solved. So even if the next step was to write an email to a customer asking for something, and if it was only the leader who could write emails to those customers, there would be a person responsible from the team that would make sure that the leader writes an email to the customer. And those problem-solving sheets, they would be then digitized and they would start working on them. And then the third part of what we were creating during those workshops were the dashboards. So dashboards for their daily meetings. And with the dashboards, different companies approach it differently. From my experience, the best way to do it is that you have certain things that have to be on the dashboard. So how much work do we have for today? How much work did we do yesterday or in the last week? Who's in the office and who's on holidays? Things like that, they have to be there. But what other things are there and how the dashboard is constructed, how it looks like, how clean or unclean it is, that was always up to the team. My experience is that a lot of companies like to have the dashboard standardized and nice and clean. The problem is the teams aren't very happy to use those cold standardized dashboards. If you let the team build their own dashboard, it's their own dashboard, and they will be way more willing to work with it, to update it, and to keep it for months and months and years. And then after the workshop phase, where we would do the value stream mapping and problem solving and visual management boards, we would have about 4 to 6 weeks to implement the changes and to get used to the new ways of working. So during that time, people would put a lot of effort into solving those problems that we have on the problem solving sheets. They would already start meeting every day by the dashboard at exactly the same time for no more than 15 minutes. We would help them with those meetings at the beginning. So somebody from my team would go there every day at the beginning with a checklist. And for the first week, the team leader was running the meetings. But then after that, the team leaders were not allowed to run dashboard meetings. So every week, the dashboard meetings would be run by somebody from the team, but not by the team leader. You have to remember that part of lean management, part of continuous improvement culture is the idea of self-managing teams. And you really want to grow your teams to a point where the team leader can basically go for vacation for a month and the team can still work and the team still can handle everything that is happening. Some of the people, with some of the changes that we have been doing, they had a lot of problems or doubts about them. What we were encouraging them to do was give it a try for those 4 to 6 weeks, right? And then At the end, we're going to talk about it and we'll see. Visual management and those daily dashboard meetings were usually the thing that would get the most pushback during the workshops. But at the end of the workshops, we would do a survey asking people what they thought and what they liked and what they didn't like, and they would grade those three elements, right? So they would grade how good was value stream mapping and problem solving and visual management. And basically every time visual management would get the lowest notes. So people would say value stream mapping, problem solving, that was great, that's gonna come in handy. Visual management, we don't like that, we don't think it's gonna work. After those 6 weeks, after they have all actually tried it and they have gone through a few cycles of doing those meetings, 9 times out of 10, visual management would get the highest grades because we would do another survey and we would ask them to grade again all those 3 elements. And at the end of the project, most of the time, visual management would get the highest grade. It is just something of an acquired taste, and people need to try it out to see how it works. But basically, my experience is it worked really, really well. And after those 6 weeks, what we would do is we would ask the team to prepare a final presentation. So it wasn't a continuous improvement team preparing the presentation. We would only do like 2 or 3 slides with the results of the surveys. The rest was up to the team. So the team was preparing a short, like 12 slides presentation about what they did, what they had trouble with, what they have achieved, what are their plans for the next few weeks or months. And then, of course, as you should, we would take them for a beer to celebrate. And don't forget to celebrate. It's really, really important to do that. Now, those lean action workouts, we have successfully gone in 2 years through the whole organization. And lean action workouts are our way of going to specific teams and telling them, listen, for the next 3 months, we are all anarchists. For the next 3 months, nothing is off limits. We cannot promise you that every idea you will have, you will be able to implement. But we can promise you that every idea you have will be treated seriously, will be treated with respect, and that we are going to try to implement together with you as many of them as possible. And as Kaizen is bringing us a lot of small changes and a few big changes, with Lean Action Workout, you get a chance to fundamentally change the way teams work. And we had amazing success with this methodology. We were able to save, I think, more than 100 FTEs with those changes made during Lean Action Workouts. And more importantly, we have heavily used them to put the continuous improvement culture in place. And you have to remember that part of this culture is finding the things to change, then changing them. But one of the toughest things to do is to make sure that those changes stay in place, that you will keep on changing things. And visual management is just the tool to do it. The third methodology that we have implemented was Six Sigma. Six Sigma has amazing success in the manufacturing world. In the business world, the problem with Six Sigma is that 99% of the problems we have in the business processes, they do not require Six Sigma approach. In fact, using Six Sigma for 99% of the problems that we have in business processes is like nailing in nails with a calculator. It can be done, but it's not the efficient way to solve them. So what we have decided was 2 things. First, we're going to give Six Sigma trainings only to the real anarchist ants. This means that we would only do something like 2 trainings a year, And for those trainings, we would only choose the people that have either been really, really active and contributing a lot during lean action workouts, or people who have been really, really active in the Kaizen program. So people we knew have that internal drive, this internal anarchy, and so by choosing those people, we were trying to ensure that when we teach them something new, when we teach them this new technology, this new set of tools, they will use this to do even better and even bigger improvements. And the second thing was, we have changed the program of the Six Sigma Green Belt training. We have trimmed down a lot of the statistics. Now, I know a lot of you will not like this idea, but the thing is, the reality of the business processes is, for most of the statistics used widely in Six Sigma, you will never get good enough data in a business process. Right? That's just how it is. So we have, of course, left the main things. You cannot call yourself a green belt if you don't know what the standard deviation is, right? And what the 5 Sigma level is. But the more advanced statistics we have removed. And we have added a lot of lean tools that we knew work really well. So the program was still 5 days, but we have changed the contents quite a lot. And this actually worked really well. The people that we have invited for those trainings, they have been really engaged, and they put a lot of effort into trying it out and seeing which of the tools we teach them will actually help them improve more. And we had quite a high rate of certification. And so with this, we have chosen the anarchist ants, and we told them, look, we know you're good at this anarchy thing. Here are the new tools. Here are the more advanced tools. Go and use them and make things better. Of course, we've been doing a lot of different things, but those 3 that I talked about, I think are the most important. The Kaizen program, the lean action workouts, and the Six Sigma. And I want to leave you with this. There's 3 things you need to remember when implementing a continuous improvement culture in your organization. First thing is, you need to have different tools and methodologies to address different kinds of problems. You use the Kaizen to address the whole organization and to tell them, you can be an anarchist a little bit every day. You use lean action workouts to address specific teams to improve as much as possible. And you use Six Sigma to get the best anarchist ants and to get them even better. Second thing is, if you want your organization to embrace the continuous improvement culture, you have to have anarchist ants at the top. So our management was extremely supportive of what we have been doing. My boss, his calendar was booked for 12 hours a day, every day. But still, every month, he would find 15 minutes for me to come to him, to tell him what the Kaizen of the month was, and for him to go down to somebody's desk and to congratulate them and to tell them how happy we are they're doing those improvements. Right? So you have to walk the talk. You have to really show that all of the levels of the organization are into this continuous improvement thing. And the third thing is, remember, there's more than one way to get to the dead cow. You cannot choose a methodology or a tool and then look for problems that it will solve. You need to see what kind of problems you have. You need to see what kind of complications you may expect. And then you have to choose tools that will be the right ones to address it. Don't do it the other way around, because you're going to end up starting with 5S in the office, and that's going to be a disaster, okay? Don't do that. And I do believe that if you follow those 3 pretty simple rules, your life, the life of your teams, and the life of your organization is going to be full of big, fat, dead cows. The final value-added step of this episode has been completed. That's all for this edition of the AI Automation Dojo. Domo arigato for joining our little rebellion. Whether you're tuning in from the corner office, the break room, or hiding from your inbox under your desk, we see you, we appreciate you, and we're slightly concerned about your posture. A huge thank you to the sensei of our production dojo, Anna Tsubal, who continuously improves our podcast, making sure we eliminate the waste and keep the good stuff. This episode was recorded at the one and only Vodzubit Studio, our very own Gemba, where the process magic and the occasional process breakdown happens. If this episode helped you streamline your thinking, then do us a solid. Subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star review. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and tell that colleague who still thinks Kaizen is the name of a German black metal band. Follow us on social media for more nuggets of wisdom and process-related shenanigans. Got a burning question, a lean success story, a Six Sigma failure that's not too funny, not to share? Drop us a line. We love hearing from you. Until next time, remember, if someone tells you that's just the way we've always done it, that's your cue to grab a katana and politely ask why. Matane.